These days, messy divorces are pretty common. Luckily, even the worst ones usually don't end in violence. However, in mid-February 2022, a Florida couple's ugly split grabbed headlines when a young father named Jared Bryan was shot after dropping off his kids at his ex-wife Shauna's house in Northeast Florida. The situation was very suspicious. Shauna was a suspect from the start, but she insisted she had nothing to do with the crime. Between January and August 2023, Shauna, her new husband and an ex-con, were arrested and charged with several crimes, including Jared's murder. They haven't been convicted yet, so we must remember they are innocent until proven guilty in court. Before we dive in, we want to express our heartfelt condolences to Jared Bryan's family and friends who miss him dearly. Jared Bryan and Shauna Lee Gardner both came from Mormon families. Shauna grew up in Utah, where her parents were successful and wealthy entrepreneurs. Jared was born in rural Missouri, but he and his family moved to Florida when he was young. More than 2 decades later, he and Shauna met while visiting a friend in Florida. Jared was a confident and likable young man with a good head on his shoulders. Shauna was a beautiful young woman with a magnetic personality, and at that point, she and Jared were both devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Needless to say, it seemed like a match made in heaven. After a whirlwind courtship that lasted less than a year, the smitten couple officially tied the knot in Salt Lake City in 2010. They lived in Orem, Utah early on because Jared was a full-time student at Utah Valley University. For nearly 4 years, Shauna's wealthy parents were their primary means of support, giving them approximately $8,000 each month to cover tuition, rent, food, and utilities. Since Jared wasn't working, he focused nearly all of his energy on his studies. Shauna's parents hoped that the arrangement would pay off down the road when Jared earned his bachelor's degree in digital media and landed a good job. However, the financial support was a constant source of tension between Shauna, her parents, and Jared. According to some sources, Shauna's parents thought Jared took the money for granted and may have even felt entitled to it. Even so, Jared graduated in 2014, and he and Shauna moved to Connecticut shortly thereafter. This was the first time they were truly on their own, but the move didn't get off to a great start. Before long, Jared began hearing rumors that his beautiful young wife was having an affair with her personal trainer. Shauna denied it, but despite the growing friction between them, she and Jared eventually became the proud parents of twins, 1 boy and 1 girl. Later, they moved more than 1,000 miles south to sunny Florida because their son had a heart condition that required him to breathe relatively warm air at or near sea level. By early 2015, Shauna was spending less time at home and more time at the gym and at a local tattoo and piercing business, where she made a number of new friends and even had certain body parts pierced. As a traditional Mormon, Jared did not approve of his wife's new friends or her lifestyle. The truth was that they no longer shared the same values. One by one, friends, family members, and co-workers noticed they had grown apart, and some even detected a palpable animosity between them. Shauna eventually got so fed up that she apparently asked one tattoo artist if they knew anyone who could shut Jared up. It is unclear if she made this statement in jest, or whether she actually wanted him hurt, or perhaps killed. Whatever the case, Shauna filed for divorce in February of 2015. Jared wasn't altogether surprised, but he wasn't happy that Shauna wanted primary custody of their 2 children. Jared was not about to give in to this unreasonable demand without a fight. This meant that they had a long and contentious road ahead of them. In 2015, Jared and Shauna divorced. Their court records, which we obtained from the St. Johns County court system, revealed a long, complicated process lasting over 5 years. Court documents show that Shauna and Jared leveled a number of unsavory accusations against one another during the divorce proceedings. It is worth noting that this is common, especially when estranged couples are fighting tooth and nail over the custody of their children. We may never know whether these claims had any merit, but in the end, the court ruled that Jared and Shauna were both fit parents and that they should share custody. As part of the agreement, they exchanged the twins at regular intervals, and it worked in the early going. After the divorce, Shauna made the most of her newfound independence. She still spent as much time with her kids as she could, But she also founded a successful baking company and found a new love interest in Mario Fernandez Solana. When they met in 2018, he was a maintenance man at the gym near Jacksonville Beach, where she regularly worked out. They got married the following year. Shanna's new husband added another layer of stress to an already tense situation. But by then, Jared had remarried as well. He described his new wife, Kirsten, as his best friend and eternal companion. Jared and Kirsten eventually had 2 children of their own. Early in their marriage, things were going so well that Jared took time out of his busy schedule to make Facebook posts, in which he laid out the 3 cornerstones of his existence. The first was his faith, the second was his wife Kirsten, and the third were his 4 children, who meant the world to him. By 2022, Jared was 33 years old and a senior Microsoft design manager with a loving family and a bright future. His unpleasant divorce from Shanana was little more than a speck in the rearview mirror. As far as he knew, she was happy with her new life, as he was with his. Jared, Kirsten, and their 2 children lived in St. Augustine, Florida, and his twins from his first marriage with Shanana regularly came to visit. On the evening of Wednesday, February 16, 2022, he loaded his 2-year-old daughter Bexley from his second marriage and his 9-year-old twins from the first marriage into his Volkswagen Atlas and drove to Shanana's house in Jacksonville Beach, about 40 miles, 64 kilometers away. This was a weekly routine since Jared and Shanana had joint custody of the children. The first leg of the trip was uneventful, and about an hour later, he dropped off the children at their mother's home and began heading back towards St. Augustine, with his daughter still strapped in the booster seat in the back. Jared noticed a spare tire and rim in the road directly in front of him as they passed an exclusive gated community called The Sanctuary. Just a few miles from Shanana's home, he could have easily driven around it and let someone else deal with it. That's probably what many would have done. But Jared had a solid work ethic and a clear sense of right and wrong. The tire was obviously a safety hazard, and he knew it could even cause an accident if he didn't get it out of the travel lane. Unsurprisingly, he brought the car to a stop, flipped on the emergency flashers, got out, and walked over to roll the tire onto the shoulder. What happened next isn't particularly clear, but apparently, as he bent down to grab the tire, a gunman or gunmen emerged from the darkness and shot him multiple times at close range. The deafening cracks ripped through the otherwise quiet night, and just a fraction of a second later, Jared fell to the ground with a sickening thud. Sadly, no one witnessed the crime, and whoever committed the heinous act disappeared into the darkness. Kirsten became anxious. When numerous calls to Jared's phone went unanswered later that evening, shortly after the shooting, a bystander drove by the horrific scene and called 911. When first responders arrived, the tire and Jared's lifeless body were still in the middle of the road. Jared wasn't armed, and there were no signs of a struggle or a fight. Thankfully, they found 2-year-old Bexley crying but unharmed in the car. Reagan's 2-year-old daughter was still strapped in her car seat behind him, and though unharmed, she was dangerously close to the gunfire. According to the initial Jacksonville Beach Police Department report, the officers were told that she was worried about her dad, but did not see what happened. Later, Jacksonville Beach investigators arrived and went over every inch of the crime scene with a fine-tooth comb. They knew that jumping to premature conclusions was unwise, but they didn't think they were dealing with a random crime or even a crime of opportunity. After all, whoever gunned Jared down did not take his child, his vehicle, his wallet, or his wedding ring, or anything of value from inside the car. Based on the odd nature of the crime scene, they concluded that someone had intentionally placed the tire in the road. That meant they were dealing with a staged ambush. If the tire had randomly fallen out of the back of a passing pickup truck, for example, there was almost no chance a Good Samaritan who stopped to move it would have been killed. They didn't know whether Jared was the intended target or if he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but they were confident that the true nature of the crime would come to light as the investigation progressed. Jared's wife Kirsten was shocked, devastated, and utterly bewildered when she found out that her beloved husband had been gunned down in cold blood. When Jared's ex-wife Shauna heard the news, she told the Florida Times-Union that she couldn't imagine what his family was going through, and that under the circumstances, The best thing that she could do would be to give them their space. But as the murder made headlines across Florida and the rest of the country, Shauna and Jared's ugly divorce would be dragged into the light for all to see. As the weeks passed, the unthinkable tragedy remained fresh in the hearts and minds of Jared's friends and loved ones. Kind words, prayers, and emotional support poured in from all over the world. But closer to home, Shauna did not attend the private memorial service held in Jared's honor. According to her mother, Shauna didn't go because she wasn't invited. Later, in a blog post, Shauna's mother said she was not invited to the funeral. I asked Shauna about the situation. His family did not invite me or want me there. By then, a few pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, but security footage from a number of homes and businesses near the crime scene threatened to blow the case wide open. In fact, a few grainy images showed a dark 2004 to 2008 Ford F-150 pickup truck with running boards and a toolbox in the back that had been in the area at the time of the murder. Unfortunately, neither the license plate nor any other distinguishing marks were visible. Worse yet, Florida is full of dark 2000-something F-150 pickup trucks matching the one in the photo. Investigators knew they had their work cut out for them, but eventually, they would find out who the truck was registered to. It is unclear if the information came as a direct result of the $55,000 reward that had been offered. We do know that officers made an unannounced visit to the owner's residence shortly thereafter. Neither the pickup truck nor its owner was there, but they found a tire leaning against the side of the house that bore a striking resemblance to the one that had been in the road the night Jared was murdered. Officers took the tire as evidence back to the station. They found it was the same size, had the same tread pattern, and was manufactured on the same date as the one taken from the crime scene. In other words, the two tires were nearly identical. This meant they had probably been purchased together and used on the same vehicle at one time or another. Shauna and her family did their best to stay out of the public eye as the investigators continued to work the case. That said, she also hired a PR firm and a prominent Florida defense attorney, Henry "Hank" Cox, because she was tired of being hounded by journalists and having images of her and her family used without her consent. She also said that the tense and often unfair media coverage made her children feel unsafe, and that some media outlets had even implied that she had something to do with Jared's murder. Shauna just wanted everyone to respect her privacy and leave her family alone. But in early July of 2022, she granted an exclusive interview to WJX-TV Action News Jax anchorwoman Kristen Rahr. During the interview, Shauna said that she had remained silent for so long because Jared's widow, Kirsten, had asked her to. Even so, she felt it was finally time to speak out, considering the intense scrutiny and rampant speculation around the case. As her innocence has come into question, Shauna Gardner spoke to me in the only TV interview she says she'll be doing to tell her side of the story. Shauna Gardner revealed she was asked by Jared Bryan's widow, Kirsten, not to speak publicly. Nobody knew for sure why Mario did not join them, but it appeared as though Shauna's second marriage was on the rocks. This could have serious repercussions at the trial if Shauna and Mario turned on one another, but only time would tell. On January 25, 2023, nearly a year after Jared's murder, Florida State Prosecutor Melissa Nelson and Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Jean Paul Smith made a remarkable announcement. Earlier that day, a 61-year-old man named Henry Arthur Tenon had been arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, second-degree murder with a weapon, accessory to a capital felony after the fact, and child abuse. Police Chief Smith also said that Jared was the target of an ambush and that the tire was intentionally placed along the route he traveled from his ex-wife's home. Prosecutor Nelson said the case was still active, but at that point, she declined to say if she thought Shauna had anything to do with the murder. Tenon originally pleaded not guilty, but 2 months later, he changed his plea to guilty as the case against him strengthened. Arrest records showed that Tenon was a convicted felon. His rap sheet included numerous weapons charges, and he had previously rented a home from Shauna's second husband, Mario Fernandez Sano. In addition, The arrest warrant stated that he had received 3 checks from Mario in October 2022, just months before Jared was murdered. Likewise, phone records indicated the 2 men had communicated nearly 36 times. In February 2023, after Tennant's arraignment in the Duval County Courthouse, Kieran Bryan made a poignant public plea, asking him to do the right thing by telling investigators and prosecutors. Everything he knew about the murder came to light as the investigation progressed. Tennant was the first person to be arrested and charged in connection with Jared's murder, but he was not the last. Nearly 2 months later, on March 16, 2023, 35-year-old Mario Fernandez Saldana was also arrested in Orange County, Florida. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit a capital felony, and child abuse. He pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Ironically, he was arrested on the same day that State Attorney Melissa Nelson announced that Henry Arthur Tennant had pled guilty to second-degree murder and admitted to being the trigger man. In return for his plea, the state agreed to waive sentencing guidelines and drop the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to a capital felony after the fact, and child abuse, all of which were punishable by up to 30 years in prison. This meant that at the end of the trial, his prison sentence would be decades shorter than it would have been otherwise. However, the deal was contingent upon him testifying truthfully against his co-defendants. Then, on August 17, 2023, gun-wielding ATF agents unexpectedly showed up at Shauna Gardner's home in West Richland, Washington. At the time, she was inside with her children. Thankfully, she surrendered voluntarily and cooperated with the agents. But the episode must have been unimaginably stressful for her and her children. Before agents whisked Shauna away, she told a neighbor who had come to witness the arrest that she now had custody of the children. Since Shauna was arrested in a different state than where the murder was committed, she would be held on a fugitive warrant until extradition could be arranged. A Washington judge informed her that she had the right to demand that the state of Florida secure a governor's warrant before she was extradited to Duval County. Ultimately, Shauna was extradited to Florida in October 2023. According to prosecutor Nelson, the state plans to try Shauna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Saldana together and seek the death penalty for each defendant. The indictment and affidavit filed by Jacksonville Beach Detective C.L. Johns did not reveal the alleged motive behind the crime. However, shortly after the heavily redacted affidavit was made public, prosecutor Nelson reiterated that Henry Arthur Tennant was the gunman and that Shauna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Saldana helped to plan and coordinate the murder. After the arrest, Kirsten Bridgen and Jared's brother Adam gave an interview to local television station News 4 Jax. Kirsten said that she always suspected that the murder was planned. Jared was the intended target, and Tennant had not acted alone. Later in the interview, Adam said that he and Jared had heart-to-heart talks in the months leading up to Jared's murder, and Jared had expressed fear for his life. Unfortunately, Adam did not reveal who Jared said he was afraid of. Shortly after her husband was murdered, Kirsten Bridgen appeared on the Dr. Phil show. When asked about Shauna Gardner's claims that she had nothing to do with Jared's murder, Kirsten stated that she had never found Shauna to be a truthful person and did not put much weight into what she said. She also added that she thought Shauna's post-murder emotions seemed disingenuous and manufactured. Kirsten never explicitly said whether she believed Shauna had anything to do with Jared's murder, but her statement seemed to imply that she did. Either way, she was always confident that Jared's killers would be brought to justice sooner or later. In the meantime, she focused on staying busy, taking care of her children, and honoring Jared's legacy by founding the Bridgen Foundation. The foundation's main goal is to provide comfort for children in stressful situations, just like 2-year-old Bexley Bridgen was on the night her father was murdered. To do this, the foundation provides Bexley boxes filled with toys, books, blankets, and other items to police departments across the country. Officers generally give these boxes to children whose parents have been arrested or murdered, or when they are removed from abusive or unfit homes. By August 2023, it appeared that investigators and prosecutors had cracked the nefarious murder-for-hire plot, and that Shauna Gardner, her estranged husband Mario Fernandez Saldana, and Henry Arthur Tenon were the only ones involved. However, new documents released in mid-February 2024 indicate that 2 more people may have played roles as well. The names of these individuals have been redacted from the documents, but they were referred to as associates of Mario